Hi everybody, it's 314 React here, and today we're going to be looking at Terminator Resistance again, and Reshade. I've been playing around with some settings, some various shaders, along with RTGI, to try and make the game look a little bit better, and also a little bit more truthful to the films in the future war scenes. So we're going to dive into Infiltrator Mode, and we're going to do some comparisons, and I'm going to go over some of the changes that I've made. So here we have the setting on. Oh man, this mode is so cool. Oh yeah, that looks good. That looks real nice. Let's turn the setting off quickly. So that's without the setting, and that's with the settings. Wow. I mean, yeah. That's quite a difference. So the first thing to note is that the changes I've made do affect the Terminator Vision mode a bit, but not to too much of a detrimental way. But we're going to be doing the majority of this video without Terminator Vision on. Yeah, so this is how the game looks without any changes to Reshade. This is how it looks vanilla. I'm running in 4K, settings topped out. I just have film grain turned off, and I've got AMD's FSR on. Now if we go into Reshade here, and what I've done is increase the size of the font so it's easier to read, because I'm recording in 4K, so this should make it a little bit easier to see what I'm looking at and clicking on. So the main things that I have on here are DLC Sharpen, which is ticked twice for some reason, RT Global Illumination, Curves, FGFX, DepthHaze, and Real Grain. Again, DepthHaze has been ticked twice for some reason. I think as I've upgraded the Reshade over time, it's duplicated some of the shaders. But that shouldn't matter too much. The setup for this will be in the description. You should be able to paste in the contents for the Reshade.ini file, as well as the default preset file. There's also going to be a link in the description to how you get RT Global Illumination. I wouldn't say you need it. We turn RT Global Illumination off. You can see it's not critical to the effect, but it does have an effect on the lighting. You can probably do the same with MXAO as well, so don't worry about having to get that. That's just optional. It's just something I've chosen to use because it does add in a lot of extra shadowing. But like I said, you can probably use one of the other settings like MXAO. So you can do. Now, if we go over the settings, sharpening is pretty self-explanatory. Global Illumination just increases the amount of lighting, bounce lighting, and ambient occlusion. So you can see here what it's doing in the lighting channel. It's just adding in lots and lots of extra shading around here, in the grass up there, through here, bounce lighting, stuff like that. And the curves is just adjusting some of the contrast there to keep it not too bright, keep it nice and dark, kind of like the films were in the future wars. And then you've got this large scale perceptual obscurance and irradiance. So that handles the irradiance in a scene. I have that operating after RT Global Illumination, and that has a really good effect of, again, just kind of controlling the darkness of the scene to make it a bit more post-apocalyptical. And depth haze. Okay, so yeah, DLC Sharpen has been ticked twice. It's applying it twice, which is annoying. So it's double up the sharpening. I don't know why it's doing that. I think I'm going to have to clear out my shaders. But yeah, depth haze there. Although it doesn't actually look too bad with double ticked depth haze. Either way, depth haze is just there to literally just add in some fog in the sort of distance and a bit of haze in the distance there. And it also adds a bit more of a bluey effect. If we turn up the fog intensity a little bit there. Because in the films, there's a kind of fog in the distance if you look at some of the future war stuff on YouTube or just watch the films. And that fog is quite important to, again, kind of obscuring the distance a bit. So you can kind of see the silhouettes of buildings, but not too much. And then there's just a little bit of film grain being added on as well. The in-game film grain interferes with some of the effects here, but if you add in the grain here and add it after all these other effects, it doesn't interfere with them so much. The sky color tint has been set to a blue that I think matches the films as much as possible. So you've got the sort of distant fog and the darkness and the overbearing kind of post-apocalyptical look. But at the same time, you've got enough lighting to reflect what the films looked like. And then you go back to normal. This is the default. So what they've done with the art style is really good in the game. I really enjoy what Teon have done. But I think this just makes it a bit more authentic to the films. And a bit more scary as well. And especially the blue tint as well, increasing that blue tint majorly, especially with the fog in the distance there in the sky. It makes it look a lot more authentic to the films. And I'm running this with a RTX 3090, so my frame rate is 60 there, and if I turn the effect off, it jumps to 95. So it costs quite a few frames, but if you switch off or choose not to use Global Illumination, barely lose any frames with these effects on. So yeah, these effects probably cost about 1-2 FPS max. It's the Global Illumination that causes the real FPS hit there. That light in the sky is pretty bright even without these settings. So this bit here is so much like the film now. You go back to the original game, still looks good, but not so much. Also, these effects kind of take away that Unreal Engine 3 kind of look the game has. And again, this isn't a criticism towards developers. I know they're on a budget with this, but I think just adding that reshade in, boom, you got that extra shading in the building there, and it just brings that lighting in. Not only making the art style a lot more like Terminator, but also cleaning up the look of the engine so it looks a lot more modern. Because I think it's an Unreal Engine 4 game, but it does look a bit Unreal Engine 3. Especially this underground bit with RTGI, taking into account the fact that not much light is going to be getting in here. It's a lot more realistically dark under here. Makes it a lot creepier. And I just love these areas here. Like, it just feels like... I mean, it felt like you're in the films anyway. But when you turn that on, it really feels like you're in the films. But what we're going to do is, we're going to give the Global Illumination lighting a proper test. Another quick thing here, the fire just looks a lot more realistic. Because again, that lighting. Let's go in here. And here. And... there we go. There's a good test of the lighting. Look at that. Oh, so good. Oh, look at that blue light coming in. Wow, look at the difference there. Look at that. I mean, you could almost mistake that for like a Fallout game, but then you hit boop, and it just becomes Terminator with that blue light coming in. That's awesome. And of course, a little bit here. Hey, that guy didn't pay. Comes through. Oh, crushes his hand, down, walks in. There we go. So good. Anyway, come with me if you want to live. Set the ray tracing to, I think, an optimal level. I've enabled the ACS CG color space and assume sRGB input. Turned on infinite bounces, sky color mode set to 3. I've turned on image based lighting, material type, and smooth normals. So smoothing out the normal channel just means the lighting is calculated better to get nice, smooth lighting. There's some weird stuff here around the edges that could be to do with the anti-aliasing built into the engine. I may look into disabling that completely and using some alternate anti-aliasing in Reshade, but for now I'm just as it's not too bad. Got the specular set to a nice degree so it reflects a lot of the light, but it's not too shiny. Roughness I've got quite high. So obviously it's quite a rough environment overall in this game, but obviously you don't want it too rough because you want actually metal to look a lot like metal. So I think I've got a good balance there. Z thickness is just right, so there's not excessive shadow coming off the character there on the floor. We've got depth haze, where I've set the color here to be a nice blue, and I've matched that blue to all the other settings that have the color palette in as well. Got the fog strength quite high and the FogStart quite close. Got some sharpening there, it's quite high, just to give it that extra definition. That bit of film grain there, set to analog mode, and just a little bit of, not too high, just a little bit of intensity there. And then you've got the irradiance setting there, where I've raised the intensity, lowered some of the gain, just to make it a bit darker. So these bits are super blue there. Could maybe tone that down in some way, but it doesn't bother me too much. It's these bits here where it looks really spot on, I think. And it's just very creepy. Because without it, it's just so open, and again, looks a bit UE3, looks very bright. Where you go, boop, and it just looks much more creepy and authentic to the films. I want to try and find that plasma weapon, because when you start firing plasma around with RTGI activated, it absolutely... There we go. Like, look at the glow on the red there. Oh, it's so good. Let's see if we can find some violet plasma as well. There we go. Look at that. Oh, it looks so good. Just like the light reflections. It looks so good. And it really makes those plasma effects stand out. See, in the normal game, they're there, but doesn't feel quite so impactful. And then bam, with that on. Oh, look at that. That's so nice. Oh, that looks really good. And again, it just makes the overall game look better. Because it hides a lot of the deficiencies of the old Unreal Engine. Oh my god, look at that down there. That's the normal game. Again, if you go into the lighting channel, you can see the effect that's having. Look at that. And the sharpening as well just gives it that little bit of extra bit of definition, like the 4K Blu-ray. There's probably some other adjustments that can be made to this. I know they made some color correction changes to the newer releases of at least Terminator 2, and I think they made it less blue in the Future War. I'm gonna have to check that out. You could adjust the settings to account for that as well. I've definitely tried to lean heavily into the blue aspect of it. I'm gonna have to do some comparisons at some point. I think there's probably some comparisons on YouTube that go over the color correction between T2, like the original cinematic release or the VHS release, and the newer Blu-ray 4K releases, especially since they've redone it with HDR as well. The underground bits as well. Just really adds a lot of depth and light. Like it looks really flat and kind of too bright. And then boom, increases that shadowing. At the moment, I've only tried this out on Infiltrator Mode, which is very similar in style to Annihilation Line DLC. The original game content doesn't heavily lean so much on this kind of aesthetic. Like a lot more of it is during the day and stuff, so I'm gonna have to check out to see how this works on there. In fact, we can check that out now. Let's see if I can find a save game where I'm actually in the daytime. So here we are during the main campaign, where it's a bit more daytime. And it does look a bit oversaturated. Oh boy, oh boy. Oh boy. I think I've got it set on extreme difficulty for this save. There we go. So, yeah, it's a bit crazy. But then, even in the normal game engine there, when I turn that off, it's quite bright anyway. So, I don't think that makes too much of a difference. Again, it just darkens down those interior areas. And in fact, takes that sort of UE3 last gen look away from things. It's just the sky looks a bit extreme there. Ooh, Terminators look good. Let's get fully to an outside area. Whew, that is quite bright. But then, as I say, it's quite bright even in the normal game engine there when I turn all the effects off. In fact, all the settings I do makes it look a little bit like Salvation, which I think is what they were going for anyway. I think they were a bit inspired by Salvation for these daytime parts. Not too bad. Makes the sky a bit more fogged out in certain areas. Let's go back to the normal game here. It's quite bright anyway. Bang the effect back on. So yeah, maybe the daytime settings could do with a bit of adjustment, because this has been majorly tuned for the nighttime bits. See, in this dark area it's not so bad. Let's see what this next area is like when it loads.
Sorry about before.
So here we are, is again another nighttime sort of scene. Let's turn the effect off.
No need for that.
And back on.
You'll have a hard time getting up every morning if you dwell on.
Definitely looks a lot better at night. But I guess maybe the bounce lighting intensity could be toned down.
Rivers, since Pacific Division no longer exists, you will now answer to me.
I'll have to do some tweaking. Hopefully someone else can do some tweaking and let me know as well.
Go out there and meet the enemy face.
Turn the effect off. And back on.
There with me. Where are the others? Where's my husband? They're dead.
Let's have a look at the
Over here's
bounce
our
lighting.
master. If you need anything beyond the standard issue equipment, work it out with him.
So let's turn that bounce lighting down to
Here's
170,
Sergeant-in-Chief Egghead.
maybe 150. See, I don't think I'm finished tweaking with it yet, but that's where it is now. And I'm pretty happy with that. Film grain's not too bad, the sharpness is pretty good. It actually controls that lighting a bit more.
John Connor, the leader
Like her face is a bit blown out there, and then it actually controls that lighting a bit better. Like you can actually see details on her face with the effect on, rather than with the effect off, and it's just like super bright for some reason. It's really intense lighting in those bits. I've got the ambient occlusion intensity right up to the top because it seems to suit this game and what the effect I'm going for. And just look how much more dark and moody it is down here with the effect on. Probably is just that lighting that needs a bit of toning down. Maybe the specular tone down a little bit. So turn the specular down to 40. That's a bit better. Actually feels a lot more like an underground bunker now. With the effect off, yeah, it's just too bright, too flat. And then you can see the effect that RTGI has, if you choose not to use that. Still looks pretty good. Like I said, RTGI just adds that extra shading and lighting in there. That's my settings for trying to make Terminator Resistance look a bit more like the films. Still could do with some work, so you know, let me know in the comments what you think of any improvements you want to make. I'll leave it also in the description instructions to install Reshade and stuff like that. If you like this video and you're a fan of the Terminator series, let me know what you thought. Drop a like and a subscribe, hit the little bell, all that stuff. Hope everyone's staying safe and having a good new year, and I'll see you in the next video.